Well,
Speaking of like legends, you guys all know Michael Jordan is, right? You guys know this guy is the Michael Jordan of this sport, right? I just want to let you guys know that, like, just so you guys know,
maybe
like,
Ernesto knows.
this guy is Michael Jordan of the sport. So, I mean, you guys
Don't
are
even sub it.
very,
You
very
just say
lucky.
this because this is my limit. It's like a
Nah,
grandson.
when I was young, I went down to Coconut and I was like, my eyes were big. I was like 19 years old, helping Bruno, Mike Brown get ready
Brown.
to fight Ryder Favorite.
Yep.
And I was like, as I'm getting punched in my face, I was breathtaking by all the studs, because I follow the sport, all the studs just walking around. I'm like, oh my, like I'm here. It was awesome.
I want another question for that, because you're as involved as MMA as I was, but your passion always was related to jiu-jitsu, grappling, and everything like that. What? Why? Tell them.
I don't know. It's something about it. I felt like you could do it a lot more often without getting hurt. I felt like I was able to peak in this a lot quicker. I always competed as a black belt when I was a white belt. So I always wanted just to go with the best. And for this sport, it was kind of easier to get to go against the best than it was with fighting, because you kind of had to build your way to actually get that shot. When in this, you could surprise someone to show up in a tournament and just have a really good standout tournament, and people are like, wow, this kid's a good grappler. So I kind of think that's where I kind of went more towards.
Now, I want to hear that from you. But you see that there was something in there, because even we have all the background. When I say we, I said you, Paul, Will, oh my gosh, not Patino, and everybody in that circle, the band, Luigi, all those guys who came from that background there, still on the black belt hat. Everybody, nobody actually laughed. Everybody still.
There's a goal.
That's cool. That means that this is more than maybe boxing or something like that. You know,
I mean, for me to get my black belt was.
And I said it because you train he trained everything. He trained wrestling, he trained all the striking part, he trained the jiu-jitsu and everything else. We always around that same thing.
For me, jiu-jitsu just kept evolving. The techniques behind it, all the new funk that was coming out. I mean, I just fell in love with the sport, and I don't know, for some reason, I just really, to say if you ever got anything out of fighting or anything, I can always say I got my black belt from one of the greatest ever to be in the sport. So for me, that was important. It's like, some of you guys are going to get your bachelor's, some of you guys are going to get your master's, some of you guys might get your doctorates. For me, this is like getting my doctorate.
Yeah, for me, it was how to. Questions for Jason, guys. We're going to still talking about it. Tristan. No? Wake up, boy. I'm learning too much. Guys, give it up for Jason. You're coming back. You're not leaving. Especially then. Now, the other Jason, guys. This is not a little bit about, you're talking about wrestling, tough, boxing, tough, jiu-jitsu, tough, and now this much more encounter with reality that, reality is unfortunate reality, which is he trains all the law enforcement and military, which is two different trainings, right? One is to kill, and the other one is to...
No, they can all encompass the same things. But it's...
Let's not skip it, because I want to let you talk about this, but let's go back to how you started all this.
Well, it's funny. So I'm a 30-some-odd-year wrestler, high school, college, coached world teams, Fargo national champs, high school champs. I've coached guys that got higher than I ever got. But that was just who I was. It wasn't something I did that was cool. I was working in the shirt and tie world for a while, but I'd still leave every day to go wrestle and train for 4 hours afterwards, helping out high schools, wrestling clubs. It was just who I was, right? Sometimes people aren't about the things that they say they do, right? I was always about it. And what made me successful with everything I've done is always laser beam focused. And it was funny, I met a bunch of jiu-jitsu guys a million years ago, and it was Wald, Aramis, Minotauro, and I met them at a high school, right? And they're all grappling.
Actually, was
Stoneman Douglas.
Yeah.
So it's at Stoneman Douglas. So it's unfortunately a popular school due to negative events, but so I met all of them, and it was at a wrestling practice, and grappling wasn't as popular back then. So I see them all rolling around on the ground. I told Jason this earlier. I'm like, yo, what are you guys doing? They're all on their backs and stuff. I had a wrestling practice wrapped around each other's legs. And I'm like, yo, it ain't that kind of party. And they're like, what? No, coach, it's not like that. So they're like, coach, you gotta teach us how to wrestle. Because we wrestle. They gave me a horrible example of a wrestling stance. I'm like, ooh, that's not wrestling. So I was like, dang, all right, I gotta make you understand how to wrestle. And wrestling's just not memorizing moves, just like jiu-jitsu isn't understanding just moves. You gotta understand how to think. And then also, your wrestling and your grappling, right? They're two skill sets that are individual, two separate sports. But all your mistakes, you can be great here and great here, but all your mistakes will happen in between. So my true value didn't come and teach you guys how to wrestle, taught them how to integrate and mesh it all together. They say life and death is in the gaps. It's in between what you don't know. And then I had to teach guys how to go from striking to takedowns to ground, but how to make it all seamless. And so now I would work all day. I'd go to wrestling practices. Then I found all these jiu-jitsu guys I would train later. It's in South Florida. So I always say 8 bazillion Brazilians, right? So I had to learn Portuguese to help coach a lot of the guys. And they're all training in, like, see these nice mats that you guys are on? Back in the day, you'd have 30 Brazilian black belts on a jigsaw mat in like a 10 by 10 area that they piece it together, and then in between goes they'd have to reattach. No air conditioning. So I'd go to all these jiu-jitsu places. And then finally I ended up at Boca Black Belt, and I met Liborio. That's where ATT started. And Liborio's like, you've been working with a bunch of guys, and we're starting this American top team. You're a wrestling coach.
Yep.
And it started from there. I'm like, all right. I was telling Jason earlier that it's like, it was so long ago that the guys were like, ATT. And I was like, what is this ATT? I just knew American top team. I didn't know, I put them together yet. Yeah. And so then I trained everyone through there. World champs. And every fighting organization champs, there are guys and girls that I've worked with, and we're talking about
just
girls.
to simple for what is this guy accomplished as a coach itself. Everything he's saying, I second everything. I have all exactly the same thoughts and memories on it.
One last thing, I left that shirt and tie world after you can't serve 2 masters, you can't do 2 things, right? Or else your attention will be split in 2 different worlds. Thanks to this guy, I took a leap of faith, left that to travel the world and coach fighters and wear sweatpants all day long and every day. Happiest dude ever, you know. And basically, I took what my hobby was, I took a leap of faith and made it into work. And I would teach at all our different ATTs, like shoot. ATTs were popping up all over the place, so I teach it like, shoot man, 6 ATTs a day. And just if I wasn't driving, I was thinking about what I'm going to teach while I'm driving to the next place. So it was never a break. So where kind of things have left off to now, which he was touching on, is I teach all law enforcement and military crews primarily, but I'll stop and still work with fight schools and stuff. And the difference is, he's asking, between law enforcement and military, or between you guys and law enforcement or military or whatever, it is all the same stuff. What makes one thing work will make the other thing work. So many people get caught up in how many times you hear, oh, well, he's a wrestler, he doesn't like this. It's like everyone always looks at the differences between things versus the commonalities. If you understand what makes one thing work, the scoring and objectives might be different, but the things that make it work are the same. So I have to teach guys how to principally understand stuff, because look, you guys will be here training like a semester, and then hopefully you enjoy it enough that you reach out and go to different gyms or take the next level course or continue on. So you guys have the luxury to train all the time. I work with crews that might train an 8-hour block for a whole year, a 2-week block, and I might not ever see them again. A pre-deployment, a SWAT school.
And more than that, I think what we're doing here is way more for fun than anything else. You're not really. It's good for you to know, excellent, but it doesn't seem like you're going to be using it. But the law enforcement guy, the military guy will, right? Traveling
all over the world, whether we were talking about this earlier too, that if I get someone that won or lost, if that dude lost the fight and we're all the way in the middle of nowhere across an ocean, it's like, that's a long plane ride back. Oh man, I should have done this. Next time I'm going to do this. Like, man, if I get someone that I train, like a law enforcement setting, like shoot, there might be someone that I taught that the next day has to use something I taught. And I never know who it's gonna be in the class. Like I could teach a sea full of people, and it could be the one girl not paying attention in the back and end up having to use something that I taught. So it's super important for me to not just teach how to do the things and the stuff, but what makes things work. I have one of my buddies I teach with, and it's all crews before they get deployed to doing overseas contracts. My buddy Kaz. And he's like, Jason, he's like, look, I want shooters that can think and thinkers that can shoot. I was like, shooters that can think, thinkers that can shoot. And I'm like, shoot, man, that's good. I want fighters that can think, thinkers that can fight. Because it doesn't matter how well you can memorize movements. Can you apply movements? Because information and application of information are two totally different universes, all right? It's like you have to be so familiar with all the pieces and the parts to know what makes them work. Like, hey man, I'm gonna teach you the alphabet, but not every word uses every letter in the alphabet. So you gotta be able to put stuff together and improvise and hit things in groups of movements and series. And the cool thing is I get to teach people how to do it in a totally different environment, wearing clothes and gear and equipment and tools that obviously can be used against an adversary or can be used against you. So, man, so much more, you know, for me, I looked at it like this. I'd already been doing wrestling, fighting, grappling, straight sports stuff for 30-something years. Now it's like, well, heck, now I get to, like, look, books have more than one chapter because you're not meant to keep reading the same chapter over and over again. So now I get to teach almost like weaponized version of the same thing, but like super high level, high percentage. Because like another facility that I teach at, it's outside of Fort Bragg in North Carolina, and their motto is brilliance in the basics. Brilliance in the basics. And it's like, man, keep it simple. Like that whole KISS, like keep it simple, stupid. Like that's what you're looking for. You want a simple, good, high percentage stuff, reliable, repeatable stuff. But it's funny because like the simple stuff and the stuff that makes you successful at all these things is number one, your positioning. Like good positioning, whether you're on the ground, top, bottom, standing, your positioning's gotta be your number one priority. And that's not the sexy stuff. That is like the grueling stuff. It's the boring stuff. But that's the stuff that makes you a monster, because if you hit moves from good position, you're gonna have a much higher success rate. Because from good position, you can attack or defend, right? So it's like, well, heck, if I'm always in good position, I'll always be able to attack or defend. It's from poor position that I can't do anything. How many times you guys try to move in here from poor position and it's like, now you're caught jammed up in something, right? So, and it's funny because say with shooting stuff, because I teach fighting and integrated with shooting stuff. Well, there's more non-shooting parts of shooting than there are shooting. You guys ever go to shooting range? All right, you know, it's like, boo, 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 shooting, right? Yeah, boo, 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 boo. Well, there's more non-shooting parts of shooting than there are shooting.
So, give an example, can you do that?
Okay, so if I'm shooting a pistol, right? Well, what do I want? Number one, I want a reliable and repeatable grip on my pistol. Because reliable and repeatable grip, and first of all, reliable and repeatable process will give me a reliable and repeatable grip, right? And that'll give me reliable and repeatable results on my target, right? So it's my grip, right? Well, what is my firing hand doing? What is my support hand doing? How am I manipulating my trigger? How am I seeing my target versus my sights and having a seamless process of pressing my trigger, resetting my trigger? I mean, there's so many like simple, like awesome things that make you accurate, fast, smooth, but there are all these things that are minus the bang part. So it's like, I could do those anywhere. I don't gotta go to the shooting range to do that. So when I actually go to the shooting range, I can then work on my recoil management. Well, when it goes bang, do I have the same grip and am I right back on my sights? I mean, if you guys are shooters, you'll understand that a lot better. But so there's more non-shooting parts of shooting than there are shooting, and I can do them anywhere. I can have an unloaded pistol and just shoot the heck out of light switches, working on my whole process. If you even look at my hands are falling into the exact same spot as if I was shooting. Well, fighting is the same. There's more non-fighting parts of fighting than there are fighting. Do I work on my stance, my position, my movement? Like, I'm not even touching another person. Because now if I got to go against someone, I'm like, all right, where's his feet? Where's his hands? Is his head up? Okay, where are my feet? Where are my hands? Right? Because everything combatively is measured in time, right? The more I have to process, the longer it's going to take for me to do stuff, right?
If you're doing this right now, you've never done it before, you're the lineage of a Carlson Gracie. What that means? When those guys created the sport, it came Maeda Coma, who taught Carlos Gracie, who taught Helio Gracie, Carlson Gracie, who taught me, you know, and I taught Paul Rodriguez, who gave it Jason's black belt. So we're the same lineage. And Jason too, Jason was a friend for such a quite long time, a boxer, an MMA fighter, but now more than anything we can define this as a tactics instructor, or actually creator of a lot of, and he put a lot of jiu-jitsu positions in what he does, you know. I just want to pick your guys, I want you guys to pick their brains on this. I'm going to ask Jason, start with Jason Garpalucci first, you know. How you started the sport itself, or martial arts, or whatever it is, and how it is today.
I was in high school, Dean Thomas, Paul Rodriguez. Dean was fighting a wrestler coming up. They asked if I could come help out with him. I said sure. Went in there, worked with him. Then I left. I went to college in Iowa.
What high school?
I went to university in Timber Creek. My high school was actually named after the University of Central Florida. The high school was University High School. I transferred to Timber Creek. I went to college in Upper Iowa, and then I
Because of wrestling.
Because of wrestling, I had contact with Dean, and we kind of always stayed pretty close friends. And he asked me one day, "Hey man, would you be interested in fighting?" And I said, "What does it pay?" At the time, there was no amateur shows in the state of Florida. I've never really trained jiu-jitsu or anything like that. I just wrestled. So I took my first pro fight, and I fell in love with the sport.
How many fights now?
I'm now 10-2.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
I took third in Moondalls, and then
You could beat a lot of grappling too. You went to the World Championship for grappling too.
Yeah, and then
Tell them a little bit about this experience.
it's amazing. The crowd. I mean,
Where was that? Was you and Jason? But where?
in California, California. It was amazing. I actually went up a belt so we could coach each other because he's a belt ahead of me, and he's one weight class above. He's my best training partner, so we competed a lot. So it's easy to have a drive because he was doing the same thing I was doing always at the same time. So we always went at it. So it was awesome to have someone like that. And then we went to California, and we both placed third.
Yeah.
And then we both 2 years ago both won the Team USA trials. Represent Team
To
USA.
qualify
Yeah.
for the USA.
We both won the qualifiers.
And tell them a little bit about training the girls. Because I really wanted to inspire those little girls there. Because I tell you this,
Well, I mean,
it's incredible to see. It's not about size. It can't be about size.
so women, females, they all tend to fade away from the sport for some reason because they think it's a manly sport. Because you see the guys that are on television, you know, some of them are very brute, but when it comes to sports, believe it or not, females learn way easier than a male will. You guys are more technical than the men will ever be because you guys don't rely on strength. You guys actually rely on technique, and for me, it's easier because I'm a technician, so it's easier to teach someone to be technical and actually learn the moves and to be explosive and just be strong. That stuff runs out when you go against someone who's very technical, and you can add the speed and the strength to go along with it.
I got to go over something right now. There's a huge subject right now in the sports in general about women equality. What do you think of that? That's because there's a very, it's a polemic subject because is women equal to men in each way? But what do you think?
I believe absolutely. I mean, women should have every right that the men should have, 100%. I don't even know how people can compare the difference. That's just.
There's a lot of people compare the difference in terms of strength and size and explosiveness and how rough the training should be. There's a lot of people who are putting out there women should be trained with men.
If you got to make it realistic as possible, I don't see nothing wrong with training with men. I don't see nothing. I mean, it's a sport. Same thing that can save your life in the long run if something ever bad was to happen. So if you never know what it's like to grapple with a guy who's physically stronger than you, then in real life you're gonna have a hard time at ever protecting yourself.
No, I want to hear that. I personally agree with a lot of stuff. I really do. I want to hear from you because you work directly
Yeah, I mean,
with professional fighters.
Yeah,
and-
my female fighter, we train more with guys than we do with females when it comes to fighting.
And even equality doesn't go just in terms of the training, but the spotlight, you know, that they deserve, and also the pay.
Yeah.
It's a huge difference in pay
And
too.
you see it a lot in college and high school sports when the girls' basketball team plays compared to the men's team. I'm not sure why it's like that, but I mean, that is how it is.
I just want to get your take on this thing here. Guys, have a question for Jason.
Yeah, with sports all across the board, the pay for men is like immensely
Yeah.
greater, like
Because it's
golf,
all-
basketball.
it's all that.
And I guess it's just more popularity, more people are viewing it. Do you think like women's pay in professional sports will ever be close to the men, or it was always, they'll always
In
have-
MMA, the top girls are starting to make a bigger. I mean, they're starting to make a lot more money. I mean, I hate to say it because it sounds bad, but if you're marketable in any sport, they're gonna do it for you. You know, like you have some fighters who I know that are studs that can beat UFC fighters, who train UFC fighters that will never beat the UFC because they're not marketable. So I think that has a huge part to go along with it. Unfortunately, that's how the world, I mean, at least the United States definitely works. I mean, everyone wants to make money, so if you're marketable, then you can kind of see them kind of guide you to be very, like a Conor McGregor, who was kind of guided to becoming a champion. I mean, they did an amazing job. Obviously, he had to fight a couple of tough fights, but after he proved it, like, okay, he could hold it, then they kind of like gave him that big market. And
They made more money than anybody else.
Yeah, and
But don't forget this. This is a great subject too, because in MMA exclusively, don't think MMA as a sport. It's a sport. Sometimes you have rankings and you have to branch out to rankings and you win tournaments it's not the way it works in MMA. Like I said, MMA is a spectacle. Right? If you, like they say, if you put tails in seats, you make the money. You know, and there's attention to it. But I love the question there because it's so off scale. It's ridiculous how off scale is this.
You know, I mean, I do believe though, like if you follow like sports to like actually sports, the Olympics is the only way to go off of because a gold medal, I believe, for a woman swimmer is the same as a man swimmer that if they win gold. Same for wrestling. I believe it's $250 if you won it as a wrestler, as a female, or as a male. So when it comes to Olympic sports, I believe they still pay out the same. Your sponsorships might be different according to the brand that sponsors you, but for the actual pay, I do believe the gold medals are the same price for male.
For federations, right?
Yeah.
But there's so much that goes into this, guys. It's ridiculous.
And once money becomes involved, obviously, you know, anyone like, oh man, if I open this business, I'm gonna have 500 people showing up compared to if I open this business, I might have 50. At the end of the day, people put money in front of everything else besides what's right.
There's so much to talk about the subject. I don't even want to go there. I want to guys questions for Jason. Michael, I know you want to ask something.
You mentioned earlier that you think men and women are like completely equal in sports, or actually Master Liborio asked about that, and you were talking about having the same rights and stuff. I agree with the rights part, but being equal, do you think that applies to sports that actually rely on physical strength? Like in the Olympics, one of the sports they have, I don't know what it's called, is basically just throwing a heavy thing as far as you can.
Like a shot put?
That, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's why we have two different. I mean, we are two different. I'm a man. She's a woman. I'm gonna be stronger naturally than she would be if we're the same size, same weight. Logically, I should be, but we don't compete against each other. I mean, I think what he means is like the platform is she should get as much recognition as I do. If she wins and I win, like I shouldn't be making 100,000 if she's making 10,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, but also there's a lot of guys. Believe me, there is a lot of wording out there is actually, it's pretty modern, this polemic, this subject of in women equality. And not just for the viewers, not just for the spotlight, for the pay also, but how the transition in terms of training and all of this. Like it says, I want exactly this, I want to pick their brains over this. I have coaches that are completely against women fighting or women competing in a sport, in any sport. Any sport. I know people that are like this. I remember Dana White talking about this before Ronda Rousey. Girls are never fighting UFC. Never. I remember he was passionate about the sport. And at the same time, I saw this guy, because you see, the signs of the dollars there, and then you had Ching, and suddenly Ronda Rousey was heading the.
Yeah, so I don't have like a question. I think this is more like an addition to this.
Yeah.
I think that, especially in MMA, people don't like to watch aggressive women as much as they like to watch aggressive men. And so the lack of exposure of women who train just perpetuates that cycle. And so I think that's I think the equality problem is more about the mindset of the sport and not about the actual technical skill.
Yeah. But there's a lot, yeah.
I think it's the marketing behind it, right? It's the people that are making the decisions, right? They're the ones that are pushing things, right? Because think of how many dumb things that are out there that people buy into, or how many awesome things that people buy into, because there's a lot of money pushed into creating a trend or what's popular or what people are going to invest their money into and watch. Because if no one's watching something, they're not going to market it, right? And then also, I think people also like to watch other talented human beings. Like people doing badass stuff.
But let me just tell you something about watching and not watching. Because BJJ has something about this. BJJ is almost like baseball comparisons. It's amazing when you're actually playing it, when you train it, it's fun. And when we go for the technicals, but there is no spectators. I mean, people don't watch too much on TV. Mm-hmm. They have to reform the whole entire rule set to attract more people to watch. And there's a lot of people that actually practice certain sports that never will be on TV. Mm-hmm. It makes sense. How many, I don't know, how many tournaments of, what is the name of that thing? We call this peteca in Portuguese. What do you call that? It's a little thing with feathers. But it seems like there's an Olympic in it. Yeah. There's a couple of sports there. The other one that you actually go to the ice right there.
That's actually kind of fun.
That's fun, actually. Actually, that one, scrap that one.
Really
But there are some sports there that, come on guys, how many people are practicing those sports? And they are in the Olympic Games. They are there. The viewers are not there, but they are there. This is going to be one day. This has to be one day. The sport is just growing more and more.
Like you guys said, Ronda Rousey was really like the first female superstar in the UFC, and she made the company like millions of dollars. She's extremely marketable because of like that super like stone cold sort of
They build
that
character.
view. Yeah. But after she lost, the UFC was sort of missing like a lot of marketable women fighters, and I feel like they treated Cyborg and Amanda Nunes pretty poorly. They could have marketed her better because they're both killers. Do you think that that's going to start to change soon in the UFC?
But it does go back again about being a spectacle, just being a show, not just a sport. It makes sense what we're saying, that today you gotta put asses in seats. That's the most important thing you gotta move the needles. That's what.
Because if they don't ever move the needle, then they won't ever have a show to put on. But I do agree, like, there's a lot of people that do deserve a lot more.
Why was all
Marketing
this
behind
the
the
man? He was like literally disrespecting her.
Some people.
No, there's. I don't disagree at all. There's a lot of things there. There's another thing that they do with the women a lot is the sex appeal. If there's beautiful women there, sometimes it's not really about just winning. It's about how much. It's the image on it. It's the marketing.
How many diehard people are there versus regular people, right? The regular people are the ones buying the tickets. They want to watch two girls fight. If one's prettier or one's going to do something diabolically awesome, like people pay to see that potential thing, because most people that buy into all this stuff that produce and fill those seats and get those arenas, like, they just need human beings in those seats. Us, like, if you're a purist of something, you're just like a speck, you know, and we'd like the speck to get bigger. And how do you do that? You know, you have to constantly get more people introduced to it. And it's like, as horrible as it is that people aren't getting the spotlight that they need or deserve, like a tree that fell like in the woods, if nobody heard it, did it really fall? So you have great guys in gyms that never get that popularity, but everyone that's out there, like, think, man, like, and then they did a couple other trainings after that. You know, like Jason, I met him before ATT started, and then Pablo jumped on ATT, and Pablo was an Abu Dhabi champion. He would go, him and Marcelo Garcia would go against each other, and then Marcelo Garcia was on our team too for a minute. But Pablo and I trained, like, I was training Pablo 6-7 days a week, 4 or 5 hours a day. We'd wrestle and drill, go lift weights for an hour, come back. He'd have someone else teach his classes. He'd put cones down, and we would just beat the crap out of each other. And it's like, even to this day, like, his students that would watch us battle it out, they're black belts that have had black belts now. So anyways, we would train all, like, 6-7 days a week. And one day, Pablo's like, hey, Jason, he's like, look, I can't train with you today. I'm like, why, sissy, you can't train, you know? And so then he's like, no, I got to do it private. I'm like, a private? What's a private? And he's like private lesson. I'm like, what are you going to teach him? I'm like, you going to teach him like the same stuff I'm showing you? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, whatever. What do you get paid for that? It's a long time ago too. He's like, $175 an hour. And I'm like, you mean like, because wrestling, bro, right? You're a wrestler, so wrestling is like not like that. So it opened my eyes, right? Because there's so many people that, like, you guys are all older. Like, not saying that you're old, but you're older. Like, most people already start wrestling younger. At least, like, I started late in wrestling and was just getting into high school. So now I didn't realize that there's all this value.